Hi and welcome to the in-depth guide for EffectMat. If you haven't already, check out the quick start guide because that's got the basics to get you up and running, but if you want, let's dive deeper and explore more of the features. So I'm going to apply EffectMat to my pre-comp here, enable the guide and set the mat. Using the transform tab we can create some transitions pretty easily, but they're quite simple, so let's take a look at how we can make a more fancy example. So I'm going to start by keyframing the Y to -100 and then over 1 second go to 0. That's a very basic transition already. To make it better, what we can do is also keyframe the position of the layer itself. So at the end we'll keyframe it in its original position, and at the start what we're going to do is move this up half the size of the layer. So because the layer is 500 pixels, I'm going to move it up 250 pixels. And let's apply the same expression to that. Now this doesn't look very good. What we want to do is keyframe the mat's position. So we set a keyframe there and then set another keyframe where it was at the end, and here we want to update the mat's position. So now we can't see anything, and again we want to apply the same expression to those. So already we've got a more interesting looking transition because it's coming in from both directions instead of just the layer remaining static and then it coming in from the top or bottom. We can make this even more interesting if we add some parallax to that by applying position to the text inside. So again, same timings, 0 to 1 second. I'm going to, at the start, make this text appear at the top and then expose that down. And there we've got some nice parallax. Now let's try a different kind of transition. I'm going to use the expansion here. So keyframe it at 0% at the end, and let's go -100 at the start to make it completely disappear. So there we have a very bare bones transition. We can make it better though. Let's add some roundness. I'm going to make it 100% and then let's increase the expansion so that it eventually expands to see everything. Now that kind of looks like a Looney Tunes transition. Let's add some rotation to that. So at the end we'll make it 0 degrees, but at the start we'll make it -90 and apply the same expression to that. So if we turn off the visual guide we can see what's happening. And if we want, we can add some motion blur to this. So EffectMat's transforms are compatible with motion blur. We need to turn it on the layer and the comp just as you would normally. And then if you wanted to customize the motion blur, you can do that. Say make it add more or no motion blur, up to you. We're not getting any motion blur from the expansion animating, and that's because it's redrawing the shape each time. The reason for that being, if the expansion is quite large and we were just scaling up the original expansion, it would be pixelated. So to emulate motion blur of the expansion, we could add a feather. I'll add, say, 200 pixels at the start, and then at the end come back to 0 pixels. And if we keyframe that, we're emulating motion blur. I'm going to remove that and instead keyframe the roundness from 100% to 0 and see what that looks like. And then we wouldn't need any expansion. That's quite interesting. Another way to create interesting transitions is to pair EffectMat with text delay. So it's important to note that text delay has to be applied first, otherwise if it's applied after we get this weird glitch result. And we also can't be using the transform tab because text delay only references the layer's transform controls here. So with that in mind, I'm going to keyframe the Y position and at 0 seconds drag that off the screen, and then I'm going to apply an elastic out transition to that. So thanks to text delay we're getting some nice delay in our animation. If we were to turn that off we could see that the entire layer is transforming at the same time, so we'll re-enable that. The only problem is that it's getting cut off at the top here, so we'll go into EffectMat, shift click that to drag that up, and then we can see the result. Simple but effective. Now let's talk about the differences between the two versions of EffectMat. In your download you'll see that there's a 2018 version and a CS6 version. The CS6 version works from CS6 to 2018, but the 2018 version only works on 2018. And the difference is that the 2018 version is compatible with all parented transforms, while CS6 version is not. So if you're running 2018, definitely use the 2018 version, otherwise use the CS6 version. Now let's take a look at why that is. So if I have a layer and I'm going to rotate it on 45-degree angle, and I'm going to set the matte, and that's fine. What if we had a null object that was also rotated 45 degrees? Well, if we parent our text layer to that, this text layer, according to its rotation, is on a 0-degree rotation, while the null is on a 45-degree rotation. So now if we click Set Map Position, it's going to be different because it thinks that this layer is actually not rotated at all because it's reading it from here. The 2018 version introduced a new function that allowed you to read the layer to world matrix, which would bypass all parented layers and just give you the actual rotation value. But we don't have access to that in CS6 to 2017, so that's why this is happening. The good news is for text layers, we can still have parented transforms even on CS6. It's just if you do rotation, it's going to get a bit funky. However, with precomps, we pretty much can't have any parents at all. So if we parented this precomp to this null and turned on collapse transformations, which we require, and we set the map position, it's going to be in an incorrect spot, and that's because this position that the effect is reading is relative to the null object, and again, that causes an offset. So we would not be able to do any parenting if we're working with a precomp in effect mat in CS6. So now we're back in 2018 where effect mat is compatible with parented transforms. We can see this null object was 45 degrees. We could still set the map position and it would work. And we note that the matte orientation value here is set to 45 degrees. Even though the rotation of the layer says it's 0, it says it's 0 because 0 relative to its parent. As mentioned previously, we require continuous rasterization to be turned on for effect mat to work. If we try and set the map position without it turned on, we get a warning message here. So let's re-enable that. However, continuous rasterization can have some unwanted consequences. For example, if we temporarily disable the matte for whatever reason, and then this layer here, or this composition here, had a layer that was actually larger than the composition, because of collapse transformations, we're actually seeing that where we might not want to. So a way around that is to create a new solid and just set that to stencil alpha, and then we won't be getting that annoying extension of the bounds there. One last thing to note is that effect mat is compatible with 3D layers. However, it's not going to take into account any Z position, unfortunately. So if this layer was pushed back in Z and we set the map position again, because this Z transformation is happening afterwards, it's not respecting that. So unfortunately, that's a limitation. And that's the same with anchor point as well as 3D rotation. If this was rotated on 3D axis, we set the map position again, it's not going to honor that change, unfortunately. However, on the bright side, matting will still work as normal regardless of the 3D transforms of your layer. That's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoy using effect mat, and make sure you let us know any feature requests or bug reports that you may have.